right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here at today's Energy Summit. This is an absolutely amazing turnout, and we're so grateful to have you here today. Joining me on stage today, I am thrilled to have Kim Greene, Chairman, President, and CEO of Georgia Power. Georgia Power is the largest subsidiary of Southern Company, which is one of the nation's largest generators of electricity, and one of our generous partners for today's summit. Kim, thank you so much for being here today.
It's a privilege, thank you.
So Kim, I want to give folks a little bit of background on you, your background, and a little bit more about Georgia Power before we dive in. So since starting at Southern Company over 30 years ago as an engineer, Kim has had the opportunity to lead teams in innovation across the entire Southern Company system. Prior to leading Georgia Power, Kim served for 5 years as Chairman, President, and CEO of Southern Company Gas. Now her focus is ensuring that Georgia Power's 2.7 million customers have access to clean, safe, reliable, and affordable energy, and that the company is prepared to meet the ever-growing demand. Georgia Power and Southern Company are continuously planning for the future, and they're focused on advancing the nation's clean energy transitions through their diverse energy portfolio, and we're going to talk about that a good bit today, Kim. So let's go ahead and get started, and I want to start really with a focus on a state that everybody's talking about, Georgia. Georgia's experienced rapid economic growth in the past few years, and it's led to an unprecedented demand, as you and I have talked about. And so what I want to unpack with you is, what does that growth actually look like? How is Georgia Power keeping up with the demand? And can we look to Georgia perhaps as a case study for what's going to happen and maybe even should happen in the rest of the country?
Well, thank you again for having me today, and it's good afternoon, everybody. It's really a privilege to be here. And yes, as Heidi mentioned, Georgia is growing fast, and the two previous speakers both mentioned Georgia. Ali Zidi talked about a solar manufacturer in Dalton, Georgia. Tom Perez mentioned a battery components manufacturer outside of Augusta, Georgia. So there is a lot of development in Georgia. And in fact, for 10 years in a row, Georgia has been deemed the best state for business. So we're very excited because all of this manufacturing that's coming to our state is looking for a lot of variables as they make a decision about where to locate their manufacturing or their industry, and certainly clean, safe, reliable, and affordable electricity is a big part of that. And so just to put a little bit of scale around the magnitude of growth that's been happening in Georgia, at Georgia Power, we go through a process about every 3 years with our Public Service Commission, and we are regulated by a 5-member elected Public Service Commission, and we present to them a 20-year plan of what we believe our growth is going to be and how we're going to meet that growth. We did that and filed a plan in January of 2022. We soon saw in the year 2022 a lot of this growth that has been referenced and much more. And we needed to go back and actually update our forecast. In January of 2022, we believe that Georgia Power and our peak demand is around 17,000 megawatts. And we believed that over the next 5 to 8 years that we would grow by about 400. So 400 megawatts on a 16,000 megawatt base. Only 18 months later, we updated our forecast and see that number, 400, growing to 6,600. A huge increase in growth, again, largely due to a lot of this manufacturing, the onshoring, the digital revolution that we're all familiar with, and the ability for those companies, again, to come to a place where they can be assured clean, safe, reliable, and affordable electricity is really important to them. And so we're very proud to be partnered with our Economic Development Office and many others to be able to make sure that it's clear that Georgia's open for business.
That's a really helpful lay of the land, Kim. And what I'd love to do is get even more specific about what we mean when we talk about a diverse energy portfolio. That's a huge priority for you. What does that mix look like across the Southern Company system? And I really am excited for you to share with our audience more about Plant Vogtle, so important to the clean energy system, and what we expect to see, say, in the next 10 years.
Oh my gosh, so I must start with Plant Vogtle. So those of you who might not know what Plant Vogtle is a nuclear plant site outside of Augusta, Georgia. And in 1987 and 1989, we brought on 2 new nuclear units. Last week, we celebrated the commercial operation of 2 additional nuclear units at that site. And those 2 nuclear units that are now operating absolutely beautifully, putting clean electricity on the power grid, were the first 2 nuclear units to be built from scratch in the United States in over 30 years. That's a huge accomplishment. A huge accomplishment for Georgia, a huge accomplishment for this country, and we're proud to show that nuclear energy is absolutely doable. We do need more nuclear energy in this country. If you care about clean energy, you have to care about nuclear power. And so we're very excited to have completed those units. Now, it was a tough journey. The first 2 units of any sort of new design are going to have more challenges, but we learned a lot, and we have a lot of lessons learned that we want to share with the industry, and we hope that others will continue to move forward on this journey. And again, I mentioned the celebration that we had last week in Augusta, and Ali Zaidi was there, the Secretary of Energy was there, and I loved her quote, which is that, and she may mention it again today, but she stated that this country needs 200 new nuclear units, 2 down, 198 to go. That was her quote. So it's really an exciting opportunity. Now, we're also, again, so those are 0 emission units. That makes Plant Vogtle, the 4 units at that site, the largest generator of clean energy in the United States. That is something, again, that a lot of these manufacturers and industries are looking at. They want a cleaner energy portfolio. We're adding a lot of solar into our mix. And in fact, Georgia ranks in the top 10 in terms of the amount of solar energy that we have in our state. We have made a lot of transitions into these cleaner resources. We're adding more batteries. And in fact, we have already lowered the amount of carbon emissions out of our portfolio from 2007 to today by over 60%. So we've made a lot of change, a lot of transition, and we continue to see that transition into the getting even greener into the future.
So let's talk, that's incredibly exciting, first on Plant Vogtle, and to your point, to what the Secretary said, I want to go deeper on this idea of nuclear energy and talk about why it's so essential to the mix. We're here in Washington, lots of policymakers here in the room watching on the live stream. What do policymakers need to understand about the role of nuclear energy and what role that actually is going to play in the long-term energy security?
So you do need a mix of different types of resources to serve a demand curve that goes up and down throughout the day, right? And there is a sort of at the bottom of that dispatch is something called baseload energy. And that is what nuclear plants provide. Baseload energy, which means that it runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, extraordinarily reliably. I've already talked about the fact that it's clean. And these large manufacturing, this onshoring, this desire to be more in control of our future with respect to whether it's manufacturing different products, mining different products, whatever it is, here in the United States, all of that is very energy dependent. And today's technology just does not allow us to serve reliably the demands that these customers, and even us as homeowners, really need 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year with the types of renewable resources that we have today. Now, again, solar is very important, wind is very important, batteries are very important, but we just don't have those technologies to a point where we can reliably count on them for every hour of the day when our peaks are the highest in the summer, in the hottest days of the summer, in the coldest days of the winter, and sometimes even in between when some of our other resources might be out for a variety of reasons. So baseload energy is critical to America's ability to serve the needs, the electric needs that we have going forward. We want to electrify the economy even more. Transportation, other types of manufacturing is looking at more types of electric processes and components. And all of that's wonderful, but we've got to have this, again, this clean, safe, reliable, and affordable baseload energy. Now, nuclear plants are more expensive to build, but what makes them economic over the long term is very low fuel cost. And that very low fuel cost is going to be maintained into the future. And in fact, these units, these 2 units that we just completed at Plant Vogtle, will run for 60 to 80 years, maybe even 100 years. This solidly puts these assets, putting clean electrons onto the grid beyond the year 2100. And if we want to ensure that we can serve all of the demands that a growing economy needs, we need to make sure that nuclear power is part of the mix going forward. And I know that's why the Secretary was so convinced in the remarks that she made how important this is to national security, our economy. It's just something that we all need to get behind.
So Kim, you laid a lot of groundwork today, and this has been such an insightful conversation. As we wrap up, as you look forward, is there anything else you want the audience to really take away today from this conversation, and what's making you optimistic about the future? I always want to end on an optimistic note.
Well, so we do have a very bright future in this country, in the state of Georgia, at our company. This growth is tremendous, and it provides opportunities, it provides jobs, it provides so much, again, opportunity for people to have jobs and to grow their communities. Let me just mention the one thing about Georgia Power and why we've been able, I believe, to be so successful in the state of Georgia. And that is, sometimes people ask me, how do you all plan for the future? And I say we have one eye on tomorrow and one eye on 20 years from now. And the fact that we operate in a market structure where we have a state-regulated enterprise, we're vertically integrated, we are the one throat to choke. We're responsible for generation, transmission, and distribution. We work with a public service commission that is concerned about ensuring that we have reliable power tomorrow and reliable power 20 years from now, which is why we were able to move forward. Again, we are so proud of the 2 units that are outside of Vogtle. When we moved forward with those units in the early days, there were 24 units, 24 AP1000 Westinghouse units, which are what is built outside of Augusta, that were in the pipeline. Out of 24 that were started, only 2 were finished. We've got to make sure that we can continue to get the rest of those units built, and I'm just very thankful for the market structure that we operate in that allows us to make these long-lived investments for our customers for the good of today and 20 years from now.
Kim, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today, but thank you so much for sharing this. Huge congratulations again on Plant Vogtle. The hard work starts now. So thank you again for joining us, Kim. Thank you to Southern Company for your support of today's program, and looking forward to introducing our next panel.
Thank you very much.
Thank
you, Heidi.